All right, so it is live now, and we'll wait and see if we've got some viewers to come and join us, and we'll do some introductions, a little quick video clip to say hello. I am Kimberly Hunt. We'll get started in just a minute. I wanted to give everybody a chance to join us since both Melanie and I have been very busy and have not done a very good job about promoting this. I'm not sure what it will be like today, which is really good for the people that do show up because they'll get more of our time to ask their questions. So let me just kick it off with the video intro and then we'll get started.
Okay, sounds good.
So, hello, for those just joining, I'm Kimberly Hunt with Revision Division, and I'm here with Melanie Doan with Final Proofwriting and Editing Services, and we're here today just to do an informal question and answer session. It should be fun, relaxed, forgive us for all our flaws. We'll get started in just a few minutes. This is live, so like I said, forgive all the, what happens, happens. But just for our viewers who are interested in learning more and as they hear, want to discover more about what Melanie does and what I do, you can, at the end, we'll talk about where you can find us as far as like on social media and our websites and that kind of thing. But I do want to point out really quick that on the Revision Division website, there's a very covert tips, which is really the blog of all the tips and author interviews and book reviews that we do. So take a look at that. And okay, so let's get started. For those of us just joining, sorry, family's running around. Being hello. So for those just joining, I am Kimberly Hunt with Revision Division. Thank you so much for coming today. I am here with Melanie Doan of Final Proof Writing and Editing Services. We're here to answer your questions, so don't be shy. To kick us off, we'll ask some questions of each other, and then we'll open it up for viewer questions. So welcome. We're going to discuss developmental editing. I think for a big part of it, the writing craft topics like character and plot development, pace, what am I forgetting, point of view, world building, all the good stuff, and then some genre specific valuable tips hopefully we'll be able to share with you today. So I guess let's get started. Do you want to just go back and forth asking each other questions and see how that goes?
Yeah, that sounds like fun.
Okay, cool. So thank you again for joining me here today. I would like to know what I usually ask when I do author interviews is I like to find out about their origin story, so how they got started writing. And I think I'd love it if you could describe your journey and how you got started editing, what your background and education experience that has helped you so far in this career path.
Yeah, absolutely. So like a lot of writers out there, I did get my start in fan fiction back when I was a teenager. It really helped me, at least with learning the developmental parts of storytelling, going from A to Z and how to build those steps in between. And then in my early 20s, I decided to shift and write my own stories from scratch, everything, building it from the ground up. And my first passion project that I was working on for over a decade was called Tainted Blood. It was a young adult paranormal romance. And it was a vampire story. I had a lot of comparisons to like a YA version of Interview with a Vampire. And I'm like, okay, that's a great, feedback from betas that I had. But I took a break from it for a while to focus on life, my professional career and all that. And when I tried getting back to it, it just wasn't there anymore. So I scrapped that project completely. But it was a great learning experience because when I did get back into it, that was when I discovered AuthorTube and all the wonderful resources that are out there from various writers at all stages of the journey. So that's when I started focusing on craft again, with outlining and planning, not just pantsing everything and writing it, from scratch. And it was a great learning experience. It helped me get to the point where I'm at now with my current work in progress, which is a young adult dark fantasy called Knights of the Wraithmaker, and I've been working on that since December 2019. And I'm currently on draft 4, so I'm almost done with it. But that's definitely been a journey, and I'm so excited for it to hopefully publish in September of this year. So that's the plan. I'm going to do indie publishing on that end.
Cool.
But for the editing side, I got my start freelancing when I was an adjunct faculty member in the English department at South University in Cleveland, Ohio. I got that job after finishing my master's in creative writing and English. I got a combined degree from Southern New Hampshire University online because I was working full-time, 40 hours a week while going through graduate school. So that part was tricky, but when I was given the opportunity to edit dissertations for graduate students, that was what really drove home the fact that I love doing this kind of thing because the work was already finished and I wasn't really doing the developmental edits on that. I was doing more proofreading, but because we had a very specific style of formatting to stick to, you had that bit of analytical aspect to make sure everything is just right. And there was a lot of pressure on my end because this is helping them graduate, not just with their bachelor's and master's, but their doctoral degree. So I'm like, all right, I got to help these guys, get this done, get it done on time. And then even from my own experience as a teacher, I was teaching composition English courses, not creative writing. So that also helped with, sentence structure, grammar, punctuation. And teaching them helped me develop those skills even more than I already had. And that's when I realized, I kind of like editing more than just teaching. So over the last 4 years, that's something I've been really trying to market myself organically, through social media, picking up different clients, word of mouth, that's still a big thing. And that's the nice thing about social media is that it's all word of mouth pretty much. So that's been my journey so far. And hopefully it'll be a path that I can take where I do it full time, working for myself. So that's the end goal for sure.
Sure, I can definitely understand that. That's fantastic. And you mentioned so many of the things that I struggle with. I do both the developmental editing and the copy editing, and it helps to have that variety and break it up. Like if I spend so many hours thinking about how to help an author, fix some pacing problems or develop the character better, it helps to switch and change and look at, does a comma belong here or not? And and kind of give your brain a break and going through and just looking for the spelling and the punctuation and kind of go back and forth and exercise both sides of the brain, I think. But I wanted to ask you a follow-up question because I wanted to hear about your experience with how you said, moving from just pantsing to plotting. Like, how did you find that? Was that extremely challenging?
It wasn't. I've always been kind of an outliner, but I wouldn't outline the way that I was outlining my papers in school. So, like, you had the Roman numerals and then the capital A, 1, lowercase a. So I was outlining that way, and I'm like, why isn't this working for my stories? And so that's when I started looking into, the 3-act structure, and then breaking it down from there. Save the Cat blew up in 2020 for sure, all over social media and AuthorTube as well. And breaking the story down from the big picture to the individual story beats really helped me piece together part by part how everything was going to build up. And even now, as I'm rereading my draft for my current edits, I'm like, man, there's still parts of the development of the story that are still coming together. Like, I wrote this, but I didn't know why I wrote it. And when I realized how it's helping the story, mind blown. Like, wow, I did this. Okay, that's kind of cool. So it just showed me how much I've grown as far as my skills with the craft for outlining to the actual drafting and editing process. So
yeah, it's super awesome.
it's been a lot of fun.
I love seeing that growth. For a few of my clients that I have worked on multiple books, whether it's within a series or just, they switched genres and still come back to me. It is amazing to see from one developmental edit to the next, the growth, and from one book to book, them applying those concepts and getting it. Like, it's very exciting. I'm sure you saw that a lot as a teacher, as a professor, but it's very rewarding to see the kind of that light bulb moment where they're like, oh, I get it, and they're doing it.
Yeah, that was my favorite part of teaching as well, because a lot of these students didn't have, grammar in their school districts, and they were coming up, and
Yeah,
a lot of the students that we had at South University were coming from low income families, and they needed a lot of assistance getting into college. They had the grades, but they might not have the funds. And when they were there, they were really passionate about making sure that they did everything they could to succeed. And so I was really excited to be an integral part of that journey. And a lot of my students were nursing students. So I would always get why do I need English if I'm going into nursing? And the summation of that is communication. You need to know how to communicate both verbally and in writing to do your job. And even though you're not seeing it right now, it will come back into play later on in your career.
absolutely.
They'll have that, like you said, the light bulb moment further on down the line. It's okay if it didn't happen right then and there, but they would make that connection. So it was a lot of fun helping them go from the beginning of the semester to the end, and then seeing their improvement as well with each different project we had assigned for them.
So exciting. Awesome. So I don't want to monopolize. I'll give you a turn to ask a question.
Oh, no problem. So I know you had mentioned family, at the start of the stream. So when you're not working with various clients, what do you and your family like to do with downtime? I know we've had a lot of downtime in the last year or so. So have you guys been doing more activities at home together? Do you try to go out when you can? How have you been working that into your schedule?
That's an excellent question. So I have 3 small children. They're in elementary school, so we're doing the whole virtual learning thing also. But my husband and I, we have been spending a lot of time together as a family. So his work involved travel before 2020. And so there's been a lot less of that, which has been very nice for us. I think I'm naturally a stay-at-home kind of. I like it quiet. I'd rather just read a book than go out and be social. But he brings that balance, and so we have done lots of great things. Like, instead of me just going for a run to relieve my stress, we do things now as a family. Like, we in the summer when the weather was better, because I'm here in Baltimore and we've got snow now. But we did a lot of bike rides, which was really cool to finally get all of the kids off the training wheels and able to go like a significant amount of miles. So we've done bike rides. We just came home from a ski weekend, which was good and bad. The muscles I haven't used in a long time are pretty sore. But yeah, we've been trying to get outside more. We're very fortunate to have space to spread out and do those kinds of things, get a little more nature in. Even if it's just a walk, I feel like I'm healthier. I feel like I can breathe better, like I can think as I'm walking or running through some of those, problems within a manuscript, and come home and be like, oh yeah, this is what we've got to do. Exactly. So yeah, so we've been spending a lot of outdoor time together. I will probably too much information, but I will share a little secret here that my husband in his youth was a D&D player, Dungeons and Dragons, and he tried to get this to be a family event. I have discovered it is not for me. Every time we came up on a scenario, he'd just look at us, and the kids and I were like, what do we do? And I said, can this be a choose your own adventure? Like, it give me an A or a B? He said, it doesn't work like that. I'm like, well, I don't work like this.
And I know a lot of D&D players who they'll have binders like this of story scenarios for this, and I'm like, okay, what if you should probably write that much and get it published or something? Like, obviously you have the storytelling capabilities, and that's a lot of what D&D is. Granted, I only played it once, and I was probably 10, but it's just such a vast, I guess, fandom. And there's so many people that have such a deep appreciation for it that I do admire it. But I'm just like, this is almost too much for my brain. Yeah. Even though I do love it, it's kind of, the funny thing about it, but it's like, it's really interesting to see people get so invested in that. and seeing how it can bring people together for sure. So
We
at least
bonded over we bonded over the elements that are like the character building and the fantasy type of things, and the kids are eating it up. They have a great time together. I've kind of tried to step aside though and say this isn't my thing. I'm gonna go edit while you do that.
there you go.
So, but yeah, we've spent a lot of family time together, and it's really cool the times where I'm like, look, I don't want to talk to anybody else. I'm just gonna sit here and read my book, and then see them all pick up a book, and we'll all just sit in the same space reading quietly. And I'm like,
That's
this is
lovely.
it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So what do you do? How you mentioned that you're very busy. You spend your days working full time as well as running your editing business. So when you do have a chance to de-stress, what is it you like to do to how you spend your free time?
Honestly, one of the things that I really like to do, especially now that I'm working 5 days a week again, is on the weekends just go out and drive for a couple of hours.
Mm,
It's nice to get that change of scenery. I know it's
yes.
winter and it's gray skies most of the time, but when the weather is decent and we're not getting pummeled with snow, it's like I need to get out of the apartment. So my
Yes.
husband and I are planning on getting out today, and even though it's a little bit chilly, we're going to try to walk at least a half mile in the park just to get, like you said, fresh air, get that, clarity with our minds, because when you're in the same space for so long, everything gets muffled up here. So even just being outside, if you're just talking with whoever you're with, or just paying attention to nature too, it's very meditative in a way,
Hmm.
without having to put a whole lot of focus into it. A lot of people say that they can't meditate because they can't tune out everything else, but all you need to do is go to the park and look outside, and you're coming into yourself. You don't need to worry about what anybody else is doing. That's your time. So that's one thing I really like to do, is get out and go to the different parks in the area as often as I can.
That's a great idea. There's so many, and there's so many unexplored areas that are, they're not well advertised. I know we have a reservoir near here, and we keep talking about, oh, we got to go check it out.
Yeah, that would be cool. There is one like that down in Columbus, Ohio, when I was living down there with my husband for a few years, and it's like, oh, this is like a really neat area, and it was big enough that people could jet ski and go boating on it and everything like that. So that was a lot of fun, and I know they're opening up a few new parks here in our metro park system in Cleveland. So there's always something to go see and do. Oh, thank you, Jill. Yes, we need some sunshine for sure.
Very nice. Thanks for joining us, Jill. So we'll give Jill a chance to ask questions too, as well as others that are joining. But let me ask you, if I may,
Mhm.
um, because I can go on and on about the writing craft and writing great stories, and I'm specifically in love with the romance genre. But I want to learn more about. You specialize, I think, mostly in science fiction and fantasy, correct?
More science. Oh, sorry, more fantasy than science fiction.
Okay.
But fantasy is something that I got into over the last few years. It wasn't always my favorite genre, just because the worlds were so massive, and it was
Hmm.
intimidating for me almost to try to get involved in all the characterization and learning all the places. The
Yeah.
names are usually a little bit out there, so. But what got me into fantasy, funny enough, was reading Game of Thrones, the first book,
Yeah.
and I I've been reading it for like almost a year and a half. It is kind of a slow burn book. It's one that you need to take your time with and not rush through. And I kind of like that with the way George R. R. Martin set it up, where the pacing is slow, but it's not so slow that you're going to get bored with it. It's just you want to take everything in, you want to process it, you want to care about those characters. I couldn't get into the show as much, but the book, I love the book. It's definitely in my top 10 favorites. But I also really enjoy young adult fantasy as well. The Hush Hush series by Becca Fitzpatrick is what inspired me to write YA fantasy with my own series. So that's been a lot of fun to kind of use that as a template with the world building aspect, and then developing my characters from book one through book four, because I'm going to have a trilogy, and then the fourth book that I write will be the prequel. So it's not going to be four consecutive books, but I'm going to do that split where I have the prequel after everything else that's happening currently. So it's
Are
nice
you
to
writing
see.
them in chronological order though? Like, are you writing the prequel first, or you come back to
No,
it?
I'm actually going to write the prequel afterwards because I want to get this story out fully fleshed first, and
Mm-hmm.
then see what's happening in, say, the third book, what's going to be happening in the prequel that will affect that one.
Awesome.
So I don't think it's going to be like a Cassandra Clare thing where I have one trilogy and then I have another prequel trilogy and another prequel trilogy before that. But at least one big prequel to set the trilogy up after everybody gets used to those characters. So,
So, what pet peeves do you see over and over in fantasy? Like, for example, I cringe when I read, "She let out a breath she didn't know she was holding," and I'm like, "No, there it is again."
yeah, I would have to say when the magic systems are not fully fleshed out and they just magically work for the characters, like, oh, I have magic. I want to go up against a bad guy, and then everything is great. Like when that happens so quickly, it's no. It could be a page turner up until like 100 or even 150, but then if that happens, it's DNF'd. I can't do it. Or if it's a project that I'm editing, I will go back to the author and say, hey, this needs to be, refined a little bit more. You need to flesh this out more. Otherwise, it's not going to be believable for the reader.
Right, you've
So,
got to have those like the foreshadowing and the build, the so that it makes sense. It can be a plot twist, it can be a surprise, it can be, a fantasy element, but it's got to be. It can't be convenient. It can't be
right.
like in a crime fiction. All of a sudden, he has a gun. I'm like, wait, where did this
Where
come
did it come from? Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a question here from Jill. She wants to know before you started writing, or before you start writing, do you outline first? Do you spend time with the basics? And she said that she finds she needs to make a very basic outline, but she is a pantser.
Um, as far as outlining goes, I don't need to outline before each of my writing sessions, but I will spend maybe a month or two working on my outline, getting as detailed as possible, and then taking that information and really fleshing it out more in the drafting stage. So I will try to get as detailed as possible with writing it down. I do write my outlines by hand. It's a lot easier for me, especially when I'm following along down the paper and then transferring that information to the story on my computer. But sometimes if I'm in a later draft like I am now, I might sit down and say, okay, what needs to happen in this chapter? Especially because I am going to be working on continuity edits when I get to draft 5 of
Right.
my current novel. So at that point, that's when I'm really going to be going step by step with the basic outline to make sure I don't miss anything. So it really depends on where I'm at in the drafting phase, how often I'm going to outline. But I know when I do try to attempt National Novel Writing Month in November, I
Mhm.
spend a good chunk of October outlining and getting all my research notes together. But then once the outline is done, I focus on drafting. And also another step that I take is I probably do more than I need to for myself, but I will finish a draft and then just to make sure that everything matches, I'll deconstruct that completed copy back into outline form and make sure everything lines up and that I didn't miss anything.
I love that. Yeah. So one of the things I have occasionally I will have authors come to me with a manuscript that is not quite ready for developmental editing yet, or it's not ready for the way that I developmentally edit, which is it's basically I get your full manuscript, I do one or two passes, mostly two, and hand it back, and then we're kind of done until the author comes back to me for maybe copy editing later, but it's not a constant back and forth thing. And so when an author is not quite ready for that stage, I've taken on a few as coaching clients. So we would do, maybe chapter by chapter or broad concepts in a weekly discussion and then try to improve upon that. And so that's exactly what I had suggested to a couple of my coaching clients, where I said, create the outline. Don't feel like you need to stick to it, but it is a piece of paper to come back to when you sit down to write this chapter to say, what did I intend? Like, am I
Mm-hmm.
be advancing the plot, or showing a side of this character, or whatever the purpose is, it helps just to have that framework, and you can abandon it. You don't have to stick to it, but it's nice reference.
And I used to hate outlining because I would be in the mindset that I had to stick with the outline. And I finally came to accept the fact that it's not going to happen. And I know a lot of novice writers, when they're just getting started, if they've never outlined before. I know, Jill, you said that you're a pantser. So if you shift over to outlining and you feel like you have to stick with it verbatim, you're going to drive yourself crazy trying to, make sure all the points stick. It is okay to veer away from the outline. But if you are reviewing your drafts and you realize that there's a disconnection somewhere, that's the outline for us to go back and, exactly like Kimberly said, find the intention behind that motion, that action that's pushing the story forward.
Yeah. So a couple of viewers have asked about, and I love this because yes, I love words, but I also like a little bit of the technology that we use in our business to, to make things, to improve upon accuracy, to make things go faster. So I love the questions about editing software and what options are available. What do you use? Let's talk a little bit about the tools that we use.
Yeah, that's a great question. I typically work through Microsoft Word just because with drafts, it's a lot easier to, go through. It's all streamlined and set up. And honestly, I'm old school. I will print out a hard copy of whatever project is being sent to me, and I will edit by hand first and then transpose my notes back to the electronic copy. I know Grammarly has made a lot of improvements lately. I'm still a stickler, though, that even if you are using grammar software of any kind, that having a human being take a look at the draft, you're going to catch errors that even the software is going to miss. Because I will see corrections in Microsoft Word, which is connected to Grammarly now, and I'm like, no, that's correct spelling. I know that word is spelled correctly, and like you had mentioned earlier with the comma and trying to figure out if it's placed right, it'll try to get you to edit punctuation, and I'm looking at it going, no, that's perfectly fine there. You can literally spend like a good 20-30 minutes analyzing just one comma, which is why it does take so long for us to go through those projects. And even though it might be more time consuming to do it ourselves than running it through software, we know it's going to be more accurate.
Exactly. Yeah, there's no software that will replace that time that a human spends combing through a manuscript, but I'm with you. I totally, when I'm working with my independent authors, Microsoft Word is the only option I give, and we track changes and go back and forth. I use some macros, especially to find when I'm copy editing. I'll use macros to help me, with the find and replace and the finding things that inconsistencies, those kinds of things, so that I don't expect authors, though, to do that. I would recommend for authors that are self-publishing, especially, to look at like the styles, to look at using Microsoft Word styles to get your formatting consistent. And then I do like, you mentioned Grammarly, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I've also heard people rave about Perfectit and Pro Writing Aid. I've used Google Docs when I work with some publishers that demand it, but that's not my preference, and I don't suggest it.
Yeah, too many security issues.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm trying to think what else so you mentioned the whole print it out, and that's awesome. That's another way to catch mistakes. So the thing I want to add to that is use the read aloud functionality. If you're in Word and you have the computer read your manuscript back to you, or I use it to listen to a client's manuscript, it is amazing the things that I catch that I missed in the first round. Now I hate that I missed anything, but I'm glad that I catch it before it goes to print. And so the read aloud, it catches not just like where you have punctuation that's off, or if something's misspelled, like a homophone or homophone. I'm sorry, I read and I don't speak a lot, so I say things wrong. But it also catches just awkward flow. So like if you're not being concise enough, or if you find as you're listening to it that your mind is wandering, bored with your own words, that's a really good sign that that's an area that needs to be revised. So that's a good tip that I'd like to share. Yeah, so let me take a quick look. I feel like I'm ignoring some of the questions that are coming in. Okay. Oh, yeah, we've got some fans of also the read aloud feature.
Yay.
So I don't remember whose turn it is, if it's yours or mine. Do you want me to ask another question, or do you want to?
I can go ahead and ask a question.
All right.
Let me see here. I know we had a few that we were taking a look at. As far as when you're working with new clients, how do you determine who you're going to work with, who you might not be a good fit with? Do you go through like a trial period just to kind of, see if your personalities match or not, or do you focus just on the work and not the client? How do you have your process?
That's an awesome question, because it is so important to have a good fit. I mentioned that I love the repeat clients, the authors coming back to me. For me, it's the, sorry, I'm hearing that. I'm not sure if I can fix that or not. For me, it's that long-term relationship. I love building and working over a long period of time. So yeah, it's comfortable, it's familiar, but it's also that rewarding growth of seeing improvement. And in order to get there, I need to do a good vetting process in the beginning. Oh, I'm wondering if I'm going to use the headphones. Terrible, and it's not pretty, but maybe then I'll hear less of the feedback. So in the beginning, when someone reaches out to me, I'd like to make sure that we're a good fit by doing a sample edit. So I look at I ask for the full manuscript, because you'll see. Can you still hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, it's so ugly. Okay, so.
No, you're great.
So I asked for the full manuscript because the first few chapters are so revised, they have the most attention, and it helps me to see, is this quality in the first few chapters sustainable? Like, is the middle kind of saggy? Is the ending rushed? Like, does it get sloppier? Those kinds of things. I like to give a fair quote. And so I need to see the entire manuscript and flip through it and read through. First, I like to make sure the content is engaging for me. I want to enjoy my job. And if I do enjoy it, then I do a better job for my clients. So that's some of the process that I use for finding like a good fit. Over the years, I've taken on less of the topics and genres that I'm not as interested in, because I've discovered, what I'm good at and what I enjoy. And it makes the time go faster. It makes it, I feel like I deliver better quality edits if I'm enjoying what I'm reading and excited about the author. And for me, it's kind of a full package. Like, I'm not just turning over a redlined manuscript. I am actively promoting on social media about writers I believe in. I have connected publishers and writers and agents and writers and coaches, and it's a network, it's a team, a collaboration that is part of that package. So it's not just a simple. And that's why I love doing these video things too, is I'm a person, and I don't want just your words on paper. I want to know, the writer as a person, and have this be, a great working relationship. So I feel like I've rambled on. You asked me about, how to make sure it's, how I go about making sure that it's a good fit. I think the answer is mostly with a sample edit and communication back and forth. I like to do a discovery call where I make sure that I understand the writer's goals. Because if an author is self-publishing versus traditional publishing, I don't want to pitch, too expensive of a package. They're not going to need the full developmental editing, copy editing, proofreading. I'd like to direct their money where it's most valuable to their manuscript and to their goals. And then, speaking of goals, for me as a business, it's important that we set expectations. So it's not like legally binding contract, but I create an agreement and I send that over and I make sure that the author signs it and agrees with me that we have discussed these are the dates, the deliverables, what you can expect from me as far as like inline comments and a revision letter and how we'll work on pay terms and if I need a deposit and when when balances are due and those kinds of things. Like it just helps to have it written out and set expectations. So yeah, so I do that. And then I talk also in there about the number of passes because I mentioned like I'll do the in-depth first read through and then I do my my first pass where I'm making comments and suggestions, and that's really the slowest. And then I like to do the read aloud feature as a pass. And then before I turn anything over to an author, I'll go back through because sometimes when I'm reading and editing, I'll take notes that are for myself, like to come back and give examples or to share a resource. And so I just clean up and make sure that my responses, first of all, are diplomatic. Like I'm not out there to crush anybody's soul. I'm trying to be helpful. So I want to make sure that instead of just mandating that this sentence, I don't even know what you're trying to say here, it's unclear. Instead, I will nicely say, consider revising for clarity. And so those are the passes that I go through once I have a manuscript. Before that, when I'm working to identify if the client is a good fit for me, it's more about the agreement and the sample edit. That was really long-winded, I'm sorry.
No, it's totally okay, because I mean, it's good to know what the gist is going to be, because it's more than just the sample edit. It is a process. Editing does take a lot of work, and I think it's good, especially for new clients, to know what to expect. And I'm also glad that you included the piece about traditional versus self-publishing, because like you said, they're not going to need to fork out as much out-of-pocket expenses up front, because a lot of that is taken care of by the traditional publishers if they go that route. They're supposed to be, at least.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think that was a great explanation, and it's good to be thorough, because if you're not, clients aren't going to know what to expect at all, and that can make them go elsewhere. So I like that, you know exactly what's going to happen step by step, and also you have that line of communication. That's really important. That's something that I focus on too.
Yeah, it's huge. Hey, let me ask you, speaking of that, like, I don't know if you've had to not fire any clients or just establish boundaries. and so I wanted to ask about that, like if you've had to, like, kind of say, okay, we're finished working together now.
Yeah, I actually haven't had any negative experiences with my paid clients that I've worked with, knock on wood. They've all been super great, super patient with me, and very upfront with what their goals were, with what they wanted with our working relationship. One of the services that I do offer is beta reading, and I don't charge for that, because it's just giving feedback. If there's something that I might need feedback on later for one of my own projects, I'll reach out to that individual. So we kind of swap services at that point. But I did have one author who had a book that she sent me an art copy of, an advanced reader copy, and it was glaring with errors, like it from page one. And I was so bummed out, because the story itself was amazing. The story was there, but the presentation of it was so not publishing ready. And typically when I am working on the copy edits, it's the final round before it goes out for publication. And normally I don't do this, obviously, because of time and the skill level that's needed for a full manuscript proofread. I offered to do another round for her for free, and she turned me down. And I was like, okay, I know you have this scheduled to publish through ebook on December 1st. It's the second week of November. I can get this done for you. I'm gonna be pushing it. I wasn't working at the time too, so I had the time available to get it done. And she's like, no, 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 no. So she wasn't taking it seriously. I mean, she's been getting good reviews on it, most likely for the story. But at the same time, it just hurt my heart that it's like, I'm offering to help you, and you're just kind of shoving it back in my face. I'm like, okay, well, I know I'm not going to want to work with you in the future.
Right.
So she was saying, maybe I'll hire you for the next book. I'm like, nope, sorry. It's not willing to take free help. What are you going to do when you actually do pay for my services?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think just from a, quality and business standpoint, integrity, I'm careful about what we attach, revision division's name to. So many, authors that are generous in their acknowledgments and their author's notes. And so if I'm going to have my name associated with the work, I want to make sure that it's, my best work also. And so, I can totally understand that a thought of, if we're not a great match, we wouldn't work together in the future, because you want to be careful what you associate your name with.
Exactly. And the first project that I ever worked on that I was paid for was a debut novel that was being published on Amazon. And the author is still selling like 3 to 5 copies a week.
That's great.
So, yeah, and he has my name on there, not just the name of my business, but my personal name as well, both for the services themselves and also an acknowledgement piece, because we actually became really good friends and we continue to share writing advice. And it's been 1.5 years since I worked with him. So, and he's got me lined up for the follow-up book for the debut. So, yeah, it's like if you have someone who's fighting you tooth and nail when you're offering the help, it's probably not going to be a good match, unfortunately.
Right. Absolutely. Cool. So let me see here. I think we had more questions for you, and I think if you've got a little bit more time, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So I think you asked me about my process for working with clients. Maybe can I turn that around and ask you for the same, like as far as maybe not, it's up to you whether it's how you vet clients or your process. Like I talked about the passes that I go through. Is yours similar?
Yeah, it's very similar. So what I will do, as I said earlier in the broadcast, I do gain a lot of my clients by word of mouth through social media marketing, and also from recommendations from clients that I've worked with in the past. If somebody's looking for an editor, they'll tag me in a post or say, hey, reach out to Melanie at Final Proof. So once I do establish the connection with the client, I'll ask for the manuscript, and I'll also set up the expectations for, pay schedule, very much like you said, too, not having a legally binding contract, but just having something set in stone and in black and white saying, okay, this is what we've agreed upon. Mm-hmm. And if things go outside of these fundamentals here, we might have some trouble. And one of the things that I do like to include in that piece too is that open line of communication, because if I need to reach out for clarity with anything and you're not responding, if you essentially ghost me as a client, I'm going to have to make some executive decisions that might not work out well on your end. You might not like it, but it's something that needs to be done. And an example of this that I had a client who I was doing short stories for last fall, and there were 3 altogether. I had sent all the final pieces back, and they were going to get back to me on what they thought of the final read-through that I had done with the edits included. And they weren't getting back to me. The author wasn't getting back to me. The individual who connected me with the client wasn't getting back to me. And I'm like, do you want me to edit the stuff directly on the document? Do you want me to track everything and then you'll go back? And we were pushing the deadline for publication. We were about 2 weeks out. Again, it was another December release, and I had to make the executive decision, okay, I'm just going to edit everything right on the document itself to help save them time. I didn't like doing that because that's not normally how it works. That's a very rare circumstance. But that's one of the problems that you might run into, which is why it is important to keep that line of communication open, because sometimes we do have questions as editors. We need to know what you want. And if you're not clarifying that for us, it's going to put us between a rock and a hard place. So obviously not every situation is going to go smoothly. We want it to, but overall, it was still a great experience. And I know I'm going to be working with him again because the author is a great storyteller. But it was just one of those circumstances where if the lines of communication are broken, it can cause some problems. Luckily, it wasn't anything too tragic, but it was definitely a good learning experience on my end on what could happen if you don't have the boundaries set, like you had mentioned earlier. Right. So once I get that set up with the contract, I'll do the pass-through just to get a feel for what the story itself is. I'll run back and make the comments, this needs to be fixed. Here's what you need to clarify. let them make the edits, and then I'll go through the final round with the copy edits. So it's a very similar process, I think, that we both have.
Cool. It means we must be doing something right.
Right.
Awesome. Do you have more questions for me?
As far as, I know we're still in mid-February. I had to look at the date. I'm like, wow, it's mid-February already. What are your goals for the rest of this year with Revision Division?
That's an excellent question. I was just, so my husband is a dear, and he is, I just go on and on about editing or a book that I'm currently working with, and he'll listen to it. He's very supportive of the hours that I spend editing and away from the family. But I was just talking about last night how January was an excellent month, and the growth from 2020 to 2021 is right now on a very good trend, and how I was excited and hoping to keep that up. So I have some aggressive goals as far as growth. Over the years, I have shifted, like I said, to the genres I like, to more of developmental editing. I do still take on copy editing projects, especially from clients that we've established a relationship. They trust me, and they want me to continue and do the other phases, even if it's not, my specialty. So for me, it's growth in the clients that I work with within the genres that I love, and and just like I love the word of mouth, the referrals, like you said. Like I do put time into doing the social media engagement, some posts and blog posts, and those things are time consuming, but I feel like they help, they support. So when someone hears from another writer that they worked with us, they have then a reference point to go and see, like on my website, the other clients I've worked with, the books that are out there that I've helped with. It's important to have that as a reference point for them, even if that's not generating new business. I'm still hearing feedback even with the headphones. I'm taking them off.
Oops, you're muted. There you are.
All right. Great. Sorry for the glitches. It was too much, and hearing myself anyway, I might as well just lose the headphones then.
Yeah, I do. So
yeah, I have intentions to grow, and the way that I don't necessarily focus on like paid ads and how to do that. It's more about the referrals. It's more about just making sure that I'm delivering quality. So I every year continue to take advanced learning courses. I love being part of the professional associations like the EFA and ACES and Maryland Writers Association. Those are all great networking opportunities, and just staying connected and advancing my skills. So those are my goals. They're not all that concrete as far as like, grow 50% or
right.
Not very specific, but I'm looking for the organic growth. I'd love to see it just naturally happen, like you were saying, with word of mouth and the repeat clients. Those are awesome.
For sure.
So let me ask you what type of editing you enjoy most. I've talked about that I love developmental editing. Is there a specific stage that you enjoy the most?
Honestly, just because this is how I got my start when I decided to take my passion for editing and build a business out of it, I'm going to have to go with copywriting and proofreading. Mm-hmm. I love getting that completed script, once, if I've gone through the developmental parts of it, or if it was with another editor, I still see where the growth happened. So that's exciting to see the essentially finished product. And I also like it because I feel like I can enjoy the story more as I'm reading it. So not only do I look at the manuscript from the editorial perspective with fixing the line edits, but I get to enjoy the completed story. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that I like about that too is I will market the heck out of that book when it's getting ready to be published. Like you mentioned, getting it out there, making sure people are aware. And I get excited for that author as well, especially if it's a debut.
Yeah.
So I know I've had plenty of people that will, talk about my story if I'm going to live streams or whatever. They know that I've been working on this project for a year and a half now, and they'll just mention it, in passing, and it's like, hey, even if it's a quick mention of just the title, and they're planting the seed. They're
Yeah.
building that excitement. And one of the things that a lot of writers say is writers support each other, but editors do the same thing too. And also editors, of course, we are there to support the writers. And just to see that growth and to be a part of that journey for other writers, it's very humbling, because it lets me know, hey, we've all started at this point A, and now we're getting to, infinity, because there's really no end to the journey. It's just a consistent growth process. So that's probably even more than just the technical aspect of what I do as an editor. It's seeing that journey and seeing the writers get excited about their work and sharing their work with readers. That's the most fun part of it for me, for sure.
Yeah, I can totally see that.
Mhm.
Awesome. All right, so can you let authors know how they can find you, like which social media accounts and your website and that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am on pretty much all the social medias. On Twitter, I will put it in the comments here too, or can I type? But on Twitter, my username is @DoanWriter. And if I can turn my keyboard on so that it works. So I'll do this here for you to share
All right.
with our viewers. So there's that. I'm very active in the writing community on Twitter. I do have a bigger following there, but I do tend to have more interactions on Instagram, and I check that more regularly than Twitter. So if you want to see more specific steps on where I'm at with the writing and editing process, I do share my story on the gram, as the kids call it these days.
Yeah.
Let me go ahead and pull up my website for you here.
Cool.
Because I do have a website and I do have a newsletter as well. So that is actually a bi-monthly newsletter, and it's not letting me in. So I might have to put that in the comments for the replay.
Sure.
But with regards to my site, it's just a brief bio of my writing journey so far, how I've come to this point as an editor. I do have a little bit of information on there about the services that I offer. And also my website is where you can subscribe to my newsletter. And again, with the newsletter, it's bi-monthly. I give updates on writing, and then I'll also give updates on my reading goals for the year. Because, of course, as a writer, I am an avid reader. And I wish I could remember who said it. I believe it was Stephen King. In order to be a better writer, you have to read a lot. So that's something I'm always doing as well. And it's fun to talk books with other readers too, and having that perspective from the writer's standpoint, but also just someone who enjoys the story.
Exactly. Yep. So the same for me. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, Facebook. Too many places. You see on the screen now is the Facebook group for, and I think you recently joined the Vault too, right?
Just last night, actually.
Awesome. Welcome. And so, yeah, the Vault is just a little bit more of a personal help. We help each other. It's, I've got tips that I share on Facebook and Twitter, and talk about the books that I read and I edit on Instagram, and share quotes and things. But in the Vault, it's more about helping. So it's that network that I was talking about, where we have, there's publicists in there, publishers, other authors to help each other, editors, proofreaders, bloggers, beta readers. Just, it's a fantastic group. So just wanted to put the word out there if people want to join. Thank you so much for talking with me here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been fun. I'm sorry that I had my technical issues. I'll have to work on a better audio.
Oh, no worries. This flew by. I was like, wait a minute, how has this almost been an hour already?
I know it does fly by, but it is so fun, and I really appreciate you taking the time to spend it here today with us.
Thank you again for having me.
Sure. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.